Sorry, was the question about across subject areas making this
Yep.
assignment possible?
Making
Or?
literacy attainable. Looking at
across
something
all.
like this, where there's a lot of different forms of writing,
Mhm.
how can you make literacy attainable? Not just like in ELA classes, but how does this blend into others as well?
I was going to say it helps students kind of zero in on authorial intent. So then you're like, oh, I'm looking for information here. Here I'm looking for emotion. Here I'm looking for this, that, and the third. And they see how that's going to sound different from text to text. So.
I also think that giving students different options of style could help them, because not everybody is really good at reading poems or reading scientific texts, and so giving students a lot of different options of readings across the subjects and different writing assignments can also help them get interested in reading and writing also.
So I know that like this idea of transferring skills is important here. So like learning how to analyze anything or how to synthesize anything is something that you can apply in any subject. And so maybe working with other teachers on what they're doing and trying to find common language that works together.
Across. Yeah. Melissa?
I think helping the kids to make the connection of what literacy looks like, especially in math, and like that showing your work is being literate in math and like showing the steps, but also when you write in a full sentence with correct grammar, and even though it's math class and the period still means you stand, things just almost reminding them, because it's like they forget, and just say, we're still in school.
Yeah. You might not need to use like the descriptive flowery language in that, but you still need to write a certain way, and this is how you do it. Yeah, exactly. Riley?
I was just thinking about multiple access points for students, because not all students access things analytically right off the bat, and like all pieces of writing, regardless of what they are, communicate before they're understood. That's like a given if you're studying literature, poetry, or some stuff like that. So I think helping students access things in multiple ways, both emotionally and analytically, and one will definitely lead to the other, but you have to like tap that emotional component first. And you can do that in history, and you can do that in science, it's just nonetheless.
And that's one of the key things that we're seeing here with Common Core, is that literacy is not just an ELA, it's not just history, but it finds its way through a lot of other disciplines, as you're seeing, especially math and science.
So one of the things that we're going to do an aside right now, it's actually not in this PowerPoint presentation, is that we actually assume that everyone knew that in the United States of America that 45, 6 states have adopted new standards. So when we were talking about the ships and we were talking about these standards and about the work that we've done over the last few years, just in case anyone wasn't aware, the state of Massachusetts did adopt new standards in 2011. And this is actually the year of full implementation all the way through here in the state. So everyone has performed this process of, well, not everyone, but unpacking, trying to rethink what literacy means. In this case, just thinking that literacy can maybe reach diversity of subjects by just changing the audience or the task. So if anyone was unclear about that, we didn't say what this shifted from. We just started with the shifts. So we have new standards. They were adopted 3 years ago. And this is our story about them. The next thing we did, besides just getting us to think more broadly about writing, and writing across the curriculum, and realizing that writing has, like you guys just did, each piece of writing has its own language, its own qualities, its own, and all of you are so masterful with language that it didn't matter really where you were. Even if you didn't know the science, you knew the structure of that text, and you knew how it should flow, how it should feel. You knew where to put the blah and the blank or whatever. The other thing that happened in the new standards is that the idea of text is much bigger. Text includes image, includes video, includes audio. Text is a much looser term. And so in 2 years ago, we started to just do this as well. Broaden our understanding of writing, rethink writing, but also rethink text as something bigger than a page. So this is the Reading Standard 7, where it says content presented in diverse formats and media. That's where it's kind of specific in the standards. But then we also just took good old reading standards that didn't say that. So like here's R5, it says analyze the structure of texts. We began to think, what if it says analyze the composition of an image? So any place that there was text, we replaced it with image, or you could replace it with work of art, or composition of music, whatever it is, whatever the text is, to think bigger about it and have it be richer. And here's reading standard 10 written with the idea that we're talking about an image or something like that.
In your packet, if you turn to the next page, you're actually going to see a side-by-side comparison of Common Core reading standards. On the left-hand side, replaced with image, like what kind of image analysis skills that would relate to, on the right-hand side. So it's kind of an interesting piece to look at there. Okay, and then on the back of that page, we have a flow chart. Okay. On the left-hand side, we have reading, analyzing, and writing from text. Okay, so actually looking at text, meaning words on a page. And then next to that, we have what that looks like, analyzing images. So it's interesting to keep in mind what we're actually asking is the same, but through a different format. And so we're going to take a look at that right now. Okay, so we have this picture up here. On your next page, we want you to write down what you can see, okay, and what you can infer from this picture. Would we say like a minute or two?
Yeah.
Minute?
Yeah.
Just a minute. Just what do you see? What do you infer?
And remember, think about it as a text. When you say, what do you see, you can be descriptive in terms of any kind of quality that you would analyze an image of it. Analyze an image, yeah.
So just a question about the organizer. Is it one thing that you see and 3 inferences? So like they're all in a line, they're wearing coats.
Yeah.
That?
You know, it's not a ton of time to write, but we're going to ask you to stop. Okay. Now look up here. Okay. Now, add onto that or change what you wrote. Now, what do you see? Does that change your inference? Are you noticing any other details that are important? progression of the picture, how did your perspective change? How did your view of this image change with each form?
I think it kind of more solidified it. So like at first, when we just saw the line and the crowded men and everything, the first thing I noticed was it was a black and white photo, which made me think that it was from an older time period. Plus the way they were dressed, it looks older, doesn't look modern. And then the fact that they're wearing coats and hats made me think that they were outside, waiting for something. And so when you opened it up more, and then I saw free soup, it made me think, oh, well, if they're waiting in line for free soup and there's so many of them, then they're probably poor and hungry. And when was a time when so many people, were standing in such a big line outside free soup? Well, that made me think of the Great Depression. And then when you opened up even more and you see for the unemployed, that kind of solidified that it was probably in the 1920s or 30s or something around that time.
So the purpose of doing this activity was to show you what it looks like to analyze a text that's not words on a page, right? Looking really closely at each different part. Sometimes if you just take a look at the whole piece together, you lose some of the subtle nuances. So by looking really closely at the people and then as the picture progressed, you're able to really look closely at this text, which is what we ask kids to do, right? Don't just look at what the character is saying, but how is the character responding to this? How does the setting play a role in this? And so forth, and you can transfer that to other disciplines as well. So thinking about how to actually use these different formats in your class, whatever it is, how to actually teach those analytical skills. This is one example.
All right, so those were some of the big touchstones over the past few years from ELA. In math, it was a little bit different. In math, one of the big shifts actually was we actually just changed when things were taught in what grades. So it wasn't just a matter of maybe I should have a more complex text task or a more complex text or whatever. It was you actually aren't teaching that topic anymore at all in 5th grade. So this is just an example, like this standard here, which is the new 2011 standard. This standard is new to Massachusetts. Like it wasn't actually ever taught in Massachusetts before. So when you're a 5th grade teacher, you just got added a whole new thing. This one here is 5th grade. It was 6th grade, so this one got moved down. But again, if you're a 5th grade teacher, that's all new business. If you're a 6th grade teacher, you just lost that. That could be your favorite thing to teach, and it's just toast. The other thing that happened too, sometimes you can see certain things that were 5th grade were now 7th grade. So directions were not just only from one higher grade down to a lower grade. They were all mixed around. So for math, it was always about what am I actually supposed to teach in 5th grade? Do I even know now? 6, 7, 8, and trying to rework that. And knowing that our 6th graders, though, didn't have the 5th grade standards before 2011. So, the slow, kind of evolving, painful change to new standards. So we did actually, that was like a ton of our time. We even get to think about, oh, yeah, maybe I could use some cool, textual analysis of video or something. It was like, no, it was like, I don't even know what I'm teaching. Let's get that fixed first. Then the next big thing, like I said earlier, was balance. We were really a skills-driven place. We wanted kids to be able to do math and be able to show that they knew how to do math like nobody's business. But we really didn't do a lot for procedural, or a lot beyond procedural. Where's the conceptual, where kids are applying their knowledge? And so I just have we worked on balance. This is just an example of a simple way that I think it's just a little sample homework from 6th grade. So this is not going to seem revolutionary to people, I don't think, but this here is just like an applied problem, it's a little story problem, whatever. They do some magic and they can get the answer, whatever. And then in the same homework, they got a couple of those, and then they have these, which is like your straight procedural stuff, like multiply and add fractions and whatever. And then at the bottom, conceptual question. Fifth grader Colin believes that when you multiply, numbers get bigger. When you divide, numbers get smaller. Do you agree or disagree? Now, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you looked at our homework 4 or 5 years ago, this is what we were shooting for right here. You send students home, and you wanted them to be really good at it. And it was great, because that's what we were trying to achieve, so we did. But the new standards is a much more balanced approach. And so in math, all of us had to achieve some balance in our math lives. But it's actually harder than you think, because you think every day you're giving homework, you have all these assignments. It's really hard to make yourself a very balanced math teacher once you've already inherited a curriculum that's very procedural. So it was also a challenge. And then the last thing we tried to do in math was to try to actually have problems that were like hard, multi-step, not totally like, basically the kid would just repeat the same kind of task you already had them practice. Like they weren't really working on problem solving, they weren't really working about organizing information, even making some guesses about what one should do to start a problem. So this is an example of a problem that we do in 9th grade. You have this, in 18 months, this cat can have 2,000 descendants, and you're supposed to determine if that's true. And you just give students some information. They can normally have 4 to 6 cats in a litter. Female cat doesn't have kittens after 10 years. Whatever, you have all of these things, and the student sort of has to get their act together. They start seeing which information is relevant, how am I going to develop a plan, and go forward. But we weren't really doing that, to be honest. We were doing problems like you normally would see, like A, then B, then C, then D. And if you did A, that helped you to get B, and then B helped you get C, and then you win. And that's what we did. But that was the expectation, really. So we were meeting expectations. We had new expectations, so we tried to do some of that. We're still working on that. Still working on everything.
Okay, so what is changing due to the Common Core? We've talked about a lot of these shifts. Okay, so we're looking at different strategies using text, right? Making sure that texts are appropriate. What we're asking kids to do with text is appropriate. Making sure that the selection is diverse, right? We're not just picking, we're not very heavy on one genre, but they're seeing a whole variety of genres and formats and so forth. Looking at reading and writing across all disciplines. And then also, we're going to be talking about this a little bit more later this week and next week about incorporating speaking and listening into the classroom as well, right? This is really important, not just for our ELL students, but it's just a skill that kids should have. And then looking closely at performance tasks, which we're going to talk more to you about tomorrow, at sort of bigger assessments, multi-step, that require kids to do a lot of synthesis.
So one of the things that's finally come this year is that in Massachusetts, we're in our final year of determining if we're going to adopt a new assessment system. We as a school have decided to, this year schools had a choice between MCAS or a whole new state assessment system from PARC, which we will get more into, and I happen to know way more than anyone should know about that. I'm just sort of involved with them in a relationship. So suffice it to say, our entire state assessment system could change in 1 year's time. There will be a vote to see if we can change. And that means it'll be an online assessment, it'll be aligned to the new standards, it'll have a whole different set of features and feel, it'll be a whole new ballgame. So it'll be a big, big change. The rubber will hit the road with these things. I chose a math one here, but this would just, again, since I'm the math guy, this might give you a little bit of idea of how it's changing in math.
So I'm curious what your thoughts are. I've made some observations comparing some CS.
All right, I'll give some print to it. Sorry, I got it. Look. Next generation, this is just an example of some early released questions. California, This guy's a teacher in California. His name's Don Stadel. He takes some old California ones and he takes some of the new next generation assessment items and he just kind of brings them up and kind of shows some things about them that are different. And it's pretty good. It's nice, it's short. We won't watch it very long, but just sort of get a sense of the different kind of task here that's going to be asked.
Previous standardized tests given to students in California. I also have some practice questions that have been recently released from Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. And these questions are in preparation for Common Core state standards. I want to compare two grade levels here, 6th grade and 7th grade. Now let's first start with 6th grade. So I'm going to first start with a CST question from 6th grade. Once again, this is a question that has been on a previous standardized test in California recently, and it's been released. So here's the question. The question is asking for the difference in elevation between negative 55 feet and 620 feet. And students can choose from 4 answer possibilities. Let's compare this to a question recently released from Smarter Balanced. It's a Math 6 question in preparation for Common Core state standards. The question here is essentially comparing two temperatures. One is 15 degrees and the other one is negative 7 degrees. In the question, or in the task, students are told that Robert claims the difference between these two temperatures is 8 degrees. So the task here, there's 2 parts. The first part asks students to explain why Robert's claim is incorrect. So they have to actually enter in some text into this field right here and explain why 8 degrees is incorrect. The second part to this now is actually giving the correct difference in temperature. And students have to actually figure it out and enter that actual difference. Here's the second question from 6th grade CST. The question is, at what rate is...
Sorry, I would just watch all of this all the time. But that single problem shows you that we're going from an assessment environment where selecting the right response, multiple choice, even in ELA, is not going to be enough. That you're going to have to explain yourself and explain your reasoning. And the same is true when we look at park items later. The same thing happens in ELA. So it's going well beyond the bubble, and so we're hopefully going to meet those challenges this year.
Okay. All right, so now we've been talking so much about these standards. We have your specific standards in a folder here. Okay, so when you get back to your desk this afternoon, go through these, look through the language, play around with it a little bit, take a look at some of the unit plans that were in place, figure out what matches up with what, and just really dive into it. There's another piece of paper in this folder. It is a yellow piece of paper that might look a little overwhelming at first, but just take a look at it. It's actually, I think it'll be helpful. It's our start of the year checklist. So I know Emily and Courtney talked a bit about what you should be doing when you get back to your desk. We just talked about this. Right here we have a start of the year checklist with certain dates that you should be accomplishing some of these tasks by. So this just helps you figure out, like, what am I supposed to do by the time that, the next week ends? What should I have done? This has everything outlined for you, and we are happy to answer any questions at any time if you're like, I don't know what you mean by this, or is this enough, or what should I do? We're here for that, okay? So 2 important things in this folder, which we'll pass out to you right now. And then as you're thinking about all of this, Darren and I are going to be scheduling a check-in time with each of you between tomorrow and next week, just to talk about where you stand with things, what you want extra help in. If you have any questions, we're going to schedule some one-on-one meeting time, so just keep that in mind if you're feeling a little bit like, what should I be doing now? All right, so about 2 o'clock, and we want you guys to be able to have as much work time as possible. Before we set you free though, are there any questions that you have for any of us right now? Okay, well if anything comes up, we are available in our offices, or actually our phones are not set up yet, I'm trying to think. People will be at both buildings, so you can talk to either principal, one of us, or Ashley. And then that's about it until 4 o'clock, where we'll have a wrap up. Mayhew will be in room 110, and Sidney will be